sea. Together forever is my favorite place to be.
Found the other day, I thought we had a fuel leak. We did have a fuel leak coming from the feed pump. I fixed that, but I cleaned out the bilge first. Got it all nice and clean. After I fixed the fuel leak, I noticed there was some more water coming in from the hole near where the stringer sits. So that was disconcerting because that was below the water line. This little drip, but I tasted one of the drips and sure enough it's salt water. So we have a leak. This might have been around for a while. I say that because I went underneath and sanded on the outside of the boat and found a crack. And that crack actually had blue bottom paint in it. So the blue bottom paint was the bottom paint that we had when we got the boat. So I think this problem existed before we got the boat, but has probably been exacerbated over time. A bit of a preface, I was able to go outside, sand down underneath the boat, find the crack, and from there I put underwater epoxy on. It took 2 attempts to stop the flow of water, but after 2 attempts of putting underwater epoxy on that crack area, the flow of water has stopped from the inside. Now that it's dry on the inside, I can clean it up and apply lots of glass on the inside to make it fully watertight and hopefully, probably, strong enough to make us back to the United States, where we'll probably do a haul out this summer and then I'll grind away the outside and fix it there too. So in typical get the boat fixed as quick as you can fashion, this berth is no longer a bed, but a construction zone. It's a tight fit to get in here. It's not particularly comfortable. I had to take off the strainer and the fuel filter behind me just to be able to have room for me. As you see right here, the damage area is where the crack is right there, the delamination, and that little bit of blue you see behind it is actually where the water is ingressed into the hole. This hole is pretty thin right here, so that might even be bottom paint from the outside that got squeezed in there. Pretty crazy. But I've cleared out this whole area here, sanded it down, as you can see, removed some of the stringer because that's where the pressure point was, and then I'm going to build all this area back up with glass to make it super strong. You can see when I wipe it down with acetone, there's blue cracks underneath. This is the first patch on. There's 3 layers of chopped strand, a layer 1708, and then another layer of chopped strand. And I let that cure just to make sure we weren't getting any leak through or anything like that, and it looks really good to me. So I'm going to continue adding layers. So this is where I put underwater epoxy on. Before I sand that away, we paint it over. This is what that looks like. So after grinding away the gel coat, you can see what we're left with is that spiderweb pattern underneath the gel coat. And this is the side that wasn't leaking. I'll be curious to do this on the side that was leaking, see what it looked like. But definitely something we want to grind this glass away. You can see there's a little crack in there. What it looks like with all the damage ground away. And I had to follow these spiderweb cracks a fair bit back. And you can see there's just a little bit more here. But those spiderweb cracks aren't through the first layer of fiberglass, then the very tip layer of fiberglass. And I'm gonna put a bunch of fiberglass on the inside. So I figured I didn't really want to chase these the whole way down the boat and mess up the fairing when they're super thin. And I'm gonna reinforce from the inside on that. But anywhere where it was deeper, like here, I chased them. And obviously you can see that the damage was the whole way through the boat. So that's the engine room right there. So I'll explain how this happened a little bit more. The hole is fairly thin on the inside of the boat here, too thin really, and like when you press on it, you can't see, but it flexes some. With the big waves pressing on it really hard, this stringer in here, which is like one of those half moon pieces of wood that runs under the floor to hold things up, this wouldn't flex, but everything around it would, and it was basically a pressure point, and over time, flexing, it managed to put a really weak spot in the hull. And so what happened on the other side was that water was starting to seep through the cracks and get into the boat in the engine room area. So now I need to start patching this up. This side will be very similar, except on this side I already did do the fiberglass repair on the inside of the boat. So it won't go the whole way through because I probably put about, you know, a quarter to half inch thick of glass on the inside there. But you can see that because I already made the repair on the inside of the boat, that lighter yellow stuff is my inside fiberglassing. So the hole doesn't actually go the whole way through, but you can see a little bit in the transparency here where that piece of wood is, same as on the other hole. So we're gonna build this back up a little bit just to remove the really bad cracked part. And again, these spiderweb cracks are just in the very tippy top layer of the fiberglass. So we'll put a layer of glass over them, seal them up, they should be fine. Especially since I've got such thick glass on the inside of this. So, as you know, we hit a rock in Turks and Caicos, and I've ground out all of the damaged area. There was definitely some water in there. I did some tests on this side with the drill to see if I could find more water. I couldn't. So we'll fill all this back up now, start putting it back together. But the gouge is like super deep. So there's this fiberglass. So this is fiberglass in the very deep part of it. And then the other stuff here is resin, just like without glass in it. And so this is fiberglass skin, fiberglass core, and then resin surrounds it. And I guess the idea is that when you hit something, the resin will shatter, and it's the sacrificial part of the keel. And then the actual fiberglass core stays relatively damage-free. It's kind of like tempered glass or something. So when we fill it back up, I'm gonna fill it back up with thickened epoxy without any glass material in it, or without any fiberglass. So if we hit something again, it'll shatter. And then I'm gonna put a decently thick layer of glass on top of everything. But this is so thick that I'm going to have to put like a little bit of thickened epoxy, let that cure, a little bit, let it cure, otherwise it'll get too hot. So then you can see there's a little bit of shattering right here in the glass, but I've ground away a fair bit of top glass on top of this. So we should get a nice thick layer of glass just to seal all that up and make the keel complete.
So while Ryan works at the boat, he's just visiting to eat, we have a cabin at the carry away. Land time! The fire's small now. Kira was scared of the fire, but now she's getting used to it. And she was scared of pine cones too yesterday, but she's getting used to like camping stuff now. It's a little messy right now. But the bed, the little kitchen, table, the TV, bathroom in there, and 2 big bunk beds. Pretty nice.
All right, so a sail drive issue we've been having for a long time is the little boots around here have been cracking and kind of falling apart. And I put it off and I put it off. So this time we've taken off the boots. We got a lot of cleanup left to do, clean up the things that are up inside there. Now that the boots are off, we're gonna make replacement boots. I say boot, but they're really skirts. A lot of people end up using skirts because they are easier to apply than the boots. So these are the ones we took off. You can see they're in pretty broke condition, but we're just gonna make new ones, and to save time and materials and hunting, I'm just gonna make a fiberglass replacement. I'm actually gonna make each one will be 2 halves. We'll make 4 halves total out of fiberglass, and then we'll just bolt them on as the new skirts. And that should keep the water running more smoothly over that hole in the sail drives and keep some of the bigger things from getting in there. It's recording. All right, so this is our fiberglass stock sheet we made. Time to pull it off. It's 3 layers of 1708. It's pretty hard. Might not be 100% cured, but it's pretty darn close. So, where are we at with the project right now? Hauled out and basically almost paint ready. We're gonna start painting. A friend here who's helping, his name's Ben, and I'm having him do some of the grunt work. So he's gonna start painting while I finish off some of the sanding, just sanding up some of the fiberglass repairs. Yeah, it's kind of always, it's been a rush, so I haven't filmed the sanding because come on, that's boring. So after 4 days of sanding and 1 day of fiberglass repair, this is where we are. Took a lot of it down to the bare gel coat barrier coat along the water line because this was coming off anyway. The paint that came with the boat's really thick, and where it was at the water line was chipping off. So we just went ahead and took off a lot of the water line stuff, and that's all gonna need a new barrier coat. This time we're gonna do our barrier coat, and well, it's white, but we dyed it blue. That way we will know when we've gotten to our barrier coat. It'll be really obvious that, oh, we need to reapply bottom paint because we're at our barrier coat. The fiberglass repairs are going pretty good. I've just finished putting a light fairing layer on them. So they just need to be sanded out. They're pretty sturdy. The big one down here took a bit of glass work and filling, but I'm pretty pleased. I'm pretty pleased with how this turned out. So we got a shell of fiberglass, and inside it's just thickened epoxy, kind of the same as how it was built. And where the, oh, we put our lights in, our underwater lights. That's a big one. So the 4200 is still drying. This one looks a lot better. The other one, the 4200, it was a different bottle, and it was starting to go bad, so it was super tacky. And while I have no doubt that it's gonna work because it's extremely tacky, it was messy, and I'm just letting it dry a little bit before I clean it. So this is our other one, and it's got all this tacky 4200 on it. So once that gets a little bit more firm, I'll go ahead and clean that up. We had some water seeping out of the port's rudder, so I drilled a bunch of holes in it like Swiss cheese and it wasn't in the fiberglass material, it was sandwiched between the gel coat and the fiberglass. So I basically drilled a bunch of holes and let it sit for a number of days in the sun, and that let the moisture leak out, and then I sealed it back up. But this is what it looks like pre-paint and sealant. You can see my Swiss cheese work, and again, most of these were just through the gel coat layer, and there was a bigger panel that cut off there. Like I said, it's still structurally sound. The fiberglass is really fine. It's just somehow the water's getting between the two layers, and at some point it may require a bit more looking at. We had some blistering, not a lot of blistering, nothing too alarming. Blisters are more cosmetic than anything. They're not gonna sink your boat. And yeah, that's about it. So it's time to start painting. If we can get the barrier coat done today, then that means I can do bottom paint all day tomorrow, and I should be able to get it done if I do it all day tomorrow. Then that'll give us almost 24 hours of dry time before going back in the water, and this paint says it wants 12 hours of dry time before going in the water, so it's within tolerance. Alright, so I was going to mix like a gallon at a time of half of one gallon, half of the other. I bought this big thing, which is perfect because it's got the paint roller tray in there. So I'll just mix them all in there and just paint from that. Easy. Now comes, at least it's satisfying. It's not fun, but at least it's satisfying. On the way motoring over to the boatyard, I noticed that we only had water coming out when we were spinning at high RPM,
And I noticed that the engine was a little bit hotter the previous day when I had done an engine check the last time we were moving. So, sure enough, it looks like our impeller is shot. Time to put a new one in.
I hope, though, there's not impeller pieces in the heat exchanger. Where does it go? Here. So they could be pieces of the impeller in the heat exchanger. But if it was a slow dissolve over time, maybe not. I'll probably still have to check. All right, so I got it out. It's actually in really bad shape. I hadn't checked on it in a while, and to be honest, I was only checking to make sure water was coming out while the engine was running at high RPM. I wasn't checking it at idle since, well, probably for a couple months. So it could have been dying for the past couple months. I should have done a better job of checking it while at idle. So yeah, it's in really bad shape. And this is what the replacement looks like. But because it's in such bad shape, I'm definitely going to have to like open up the heat exchanger, because I bet you there's bits of this one in the heat exchanger, which is this thing right here. It's got a bunch of small tubes that basically exchange the heat from the engine water to the salt water. And those small tubes can get clogged up depending on how quickly this broke apart. 2 years ago, I did a check and they looked in really good shape. So it definitely died sometime in between there. But I'm pretty sure this just disintegrated probably over the last 6 months, because I do remember the engine having decent cooling prior to that. So it's time to replace. It's tape time. Oh yeah. We didn't clean the water line because we just don't have a lot of time. We can always clean the water line in the water, but you can't bottom paint in the water. There's the finished product for the bottom paint. If you ignore the ugly above the water line stuff, I like the way it looks. Good straight line, color's good. Once we clean above the water line with some on-off, good to go.